Hi Pop-Tarts, today I'm going to talk you through the basics of Bardic technique using tarot, or storytelling technique as it's also called. And this technique does exactly what it says on the tin pretty much. It helps you to develop stories using tarot cards. And a few of the reasons that you might want to do this. Firstly, obviously, if you are indeed a writer, you would want to do this. You might want to use tarot as a tool to help you flesh out your characters, to help you develop your plot, and work out your plot twists, etc. But the other key reason that you might want to use the storytelling technique with tarot is for study purposes. If you're only just getting to grips with your intuitive instincts with regard to each card, the universal messages for each card and that kind of thing, telling stories with tarot can be a great way to help you to really tune in to what your gut instinct is telling you, to formulate a much deeper bond with each card, and also to challenge you to think on your feet, to actually make your mind work quicker when developing stories, when developing character traits and plots, etc. You're going to need to think of keywords. You're going to be needing to think about the key things that come to mind when you turn a card over. So it really does help you to hone your abilities with tarot if you're at that stage where you need that deeper bond and you need that kind of further challenge, if you like. The third reason you might want to use storytelling technique with tarot, though, is for story as metaphor. I have a purchase option on my shop called the Storybook Tarot Reading, and really what that does is it enables me to formulate a story which helps the querent to get in touch with their deeper mission and their understanding of what's going on at the moment and their understanding of their challenges and what potentially might need to change. And I do that by placing them into a storybook setting as the principal character. And then I use oracle cards and tarot cards to help me formulate a story and to help me actually take the querent through the story as the principal character, using everything that I see and everything that comes up in the story as a metaphor for something which relates to their life. So this can actually be very useful too, and it is something that I would definitely suggest to you. So for today, I'm just going to go through some very basic things that you might need to know about storytelling technique with tarot if you are wanting to use it and start off with it. First of all, you can make many decisions about a story that you are going to write using tarot. So if you're unsure, for example, on genre, you would be able to use tarot to decide upon a genre for the story that you're thinking of writing. So, for example, the genre here could be kind of a contemporary work of literary fiction based around a guy who is very isolated and unsure. Maybe he has mental health problems. Maybe he seeks too much control. Maybe it's a dark comedy, something like that. The King of Wands, you could see that as maybe a thriller, or you could see it potentially as an action movie, because you know the King of Wands is very all about manifestation, forward motion, things happening, speed and that kind of thing. And obviously fire, you might think about action in terms of pyrotechnics or whatever you want to think of. The Fool could be a coming of age story, a rite of passage story if you like. Something to do with people growing up from adolescence to adulthood. So, you know, there's a million different ways that you could go with it when you're actually looking at your cards. You could be thinking about romance stories, horror stories, dependent upon, you know, which cards actually come to you in which moment. And you can use the cards and the messages that you get from the cards to decide upon genre. You can also use the cards to decide on the length of a piece that you're writing. If you're going to be writing a short story, if you're going to be writing a novel, many people use tarot to address how long something is going to be or how long it's going to be until something happens. So there's no reason why you can't also do that with word count, and you can figure out your own ways of doing that. You know, you can go, for example, with the number of 1,000 words and then the number of 100 words, or, you know, something to that effect. You can make it count for you. You can break it down in any which way that you like, and that will give you a mission for the word count that you're going to be using. Obviously, this is more of a notable technique if you are a writer and you are kind of stuck on how to start with a project and you want to use tarot to get planning and get moving. You can also decide on the number of key events that are going to happen in a novel or a story, and that again can be done by taking a look at the numbers in tarot and actually using that to help you decide. You know, you can turn one card over and have a look. You know, if it's the Five of Pentacles, then maybe that represents there's going to be 5 key events. You could also look at the number of figures that there are in a tarot card to decide whether there are going to be 3 key kind of main players. You know, or you can also use them to decide how many key events there are going to be. It's completely up to you. You can decide how many deaths, you can decide how many anything, depending on the genre you've selected and what you want to go with. The other thing that you can do using tarot for storytelling technique is to have a look at your plot and decide on any plot twists, plot devices, and how the shape of your story is going to go. The very basic plot with any story is beginning, middle and end. And that's kind of, you know, what people will always begin with. Beginning, middle and end is the most basic plot device that there is. And then within beginning and middle and end, you have a certain subsection of the story which is dedicated to setup, conflict and resolution. So each act in the story, if you like, each segment of the story then has its own setup, its own high action phase, and then its own ultimate resolution, which brings it back down to that calm phase where we begin again with Act 2, and it goes on thus. There are many different kinds of plot devices and plot shapes that you can use in a novel or short story, whether you're using storytelling technique for writing or you're using it for study, whatever it is. There are many different ones that you can use, but this is just the very basic one, is beginning, middle and end, and then that subsection setup, conflict and resolution. So that's something that I would advise to you if you want to get started with storytelling technique, is to use that and actually draw tarot cards to represent beginning, middle and end, and these will normally denote the main themes of the beginning, middle and end, the atmosphere, the overwhelming energy that's going to be present, and then you can actually have a look at, in the beginning, what is going to be the main conflict, which themes are going to come around most potently, and then the same for the other sections too. So that's something that you might want to consider, that setup, conflict and resolution method. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about with regard to very basic storytelling technique is character design, fleshing out your characters, making sure that they're as real as they possibly can be and that you are as bonded to them as you possibly can be. So first of all, you'll decide upon a lead character potentially, and then you'll go forward and think about the characters that are going to surround that lead character. So you can select the lead character, and then you can define their ultimate story goal. You know, what is it that they are really going after? What is their motive? What is their mission? What is their challenge? What are they really there for? What are they there to find out about themselves or about somebody else? Then you could use tarot to decide upon the gender of your lead character. You can also use tarot to decide upon the age of the lead character. And then you can do things like body type, hair colour and eye colour using tarot. And you can really explore and develop with that if you want to do so. You might not necessarily want to look at a character that's in your tarot deck and decide that that is what your lead would look like, because as I once explained in my court cards video in Trainee Tarot, a lot of tarot decks do pertain to just one kind of ethnicity, one kind of look, as is the case with the Rider-Waite, where everybody is white and conventionally attractive, I suppose you could say. I don't even think there's a single redhead in there. So it's kind of a bit bland if you're looking to develop phenotype for people. But what you can do is you can consider maybe kind of the relationship that you personally have between each of the 4 elements and what that means with regard to what somebody would look like. You know, you can be abstract, you can be a little bit more out of the box than you potentially would originally consider yourself to be allowed to go. You should consider also the characters' mannerisms, their persona. What do they seem like to other people? This is before we get down to the nitty-gritty of their core strengths and key attributes, etc. We're really looking to see what is the face that they present to the world. You know, do they have any distinctive speech patterns? You know, do they have any kind of little tics, little gestures, little fidgety things that they do? You can really go into it here, and like I explained at the beginning of the video, the more you're doing this with storytelling technique, the more you're actually investing yourself into the study of tarot. So it really is a very good study aid. It really makes you think about the characters in your deck, think about the environments, the terrain, you know, what's going on, whereabouts is the story set, for example, is another good one. You need to take a look at the location, take a look at what is around the lead character at any given time. And so many decks are just an absolute blessing for this kind of imagery, which is really inspiring and exciting. You know, and fantasy decks, or even if you're writing a fantasy novel, you could get quite a lot of meat off the bone with the Rider-Waite. In many senses. So it's really about using your imagination and utilising and harnessing your imagination to work with storytelling technique adequately. Then you're going to be looking at their core personality and their core traits, that kind of thing. And you can use as many or as few cards as you feel is necessary to actually develop and flesh out your character. And then what I would suggest you do is use a few cards to take a look at the background. The background of the lead character, and indeed every other character, will be of great importance. You need to know where your character has come from, you know, so it might be good to look into that too. And like I said, this is not just a technique for writers. This is a study aid for people who are interested in learning tarot and really bringing a deeper perspective to it. So you might not want to consider all of these ideas that I'm putting out there, but maybe if you wanted to select, for example, a card to represent a character for the purposes of study, then background would be the next logical step, taking a look at their past, taking a look at their present, you know. But if you really wanted to flesh it out and take a look at plot and take a look at all of these different variables, then that is always a good idea to do too. If you're writing a story and you're using tarot as an aid, another great thing that it would be really helpful for you to do is to take a look at your character's personal life, private life, and potentially also their work life. Maybe even also their dream life is a good idea if you wanted to do that. Take a look at their unconscious, take a look at the parts of their psyche that are really kind of affecting their movements or causing them to make decisions in a certain way. So that might be useful. And another thing to do with Bardic technique when you're developing characters is to have a look at their strengths and weaknesses. So that's also another good idea, is to take a look at, you know, where it is that they would be useful in a crisis, or where it is that they would be able to lend their help, and then, you know, taking a look at the weaknesses, that the things that they tend to struggle with. So, you know, that's an idea for Bardic technique too. You can also use Bardic technique to intuitively develop a name for the character if you want to do that. There are lots of other ways to, you know, pluck names out of the air or research certain names. I certainly do that. I'm a bit of a name vulture when it comes to writing my fiction, and I'm hugely keen on naming my characters. You know, that is for me one of the biggest things, is naming the piece and naming the characters. But you can even just path work or meditate with a specific card and just kind of divine intuitively a name for that character. So it can really go as far as you want it to go. You can also do a full out plan, like an outline, which utilises maybe even half the deck, you know. I mean, if you're at the very beginning of making up a story for one reason or another, and you feel like, you know, you want to create an outline, you don't really want to put your mark on the outline at all, you just want to see what comes up, what kind of plot twists develop, what kind of main themes come into existence, I would suggest just laying a large number of cards out on the floor and actually just spending time contemplating, meditating on what you're actually seeing, developing, allowing a story to develop organically by letting it come together in that way. And any time that you are experiencing problems with the development of a story, then, you know, you can always go on to use tarot to kind of problem shoot. You can kind of use tarot to ask yourself, what should the main considerations be at this point? How can I really ensure that this plot twist comes together? What should the resolution involve? How can I actually solve this conflict for my character? And, you know, all of the different things that I told you to look at to flesh out your main character, you can also use those same things to flesh out the other characters in your novel. But what you really need to do in that instance as well is to draw an extra card, which actually helps you to work out, who is this person to my lead character? What is their relationship? So if that's something that you haven't quite worked out, that's something that you can go into as well. A lot of the time when I do my storytelling tarot reading, I don't know if this is going to be helpful to anybody, but I tend to actually set it up in a certain way so that it speaks to me of kind of the mission that I have when I'm looking at the cards and thinking about what I'm doing for the client in terms of helping them to reach illumination and helping them to explore their unconscious. I'm not going to be able to use 3 cards and get it all in shot, so I'll just use 2, but I normally use 3 at the bottom. I normally set it up like this, and then I have a core card. So the core card will kind of represent the querent as the principal character in their story. And then what I like to do is shape it in this arch or this kind of horseshoe device, and that is to help me to concentrate on the idea that these cards kind of represent surface things, and then as we go deeper into the story, as we delve deeper and invest more into the story, these 2 cards normally represent the underlying factors in story form which the querent will need to be considering. So normally this card will be used as the starting point. So I'll use this first card to determine what is the terrain like, whereabouts does the story begin, what kind of environment is it in, what kind of world is it in, and how do I actually begin the story, how does the querent get into that other world. Have they always lived there? You know, do they find a staircase and go down into it? Is there a door? Do they undergo astral projection and go in that way? There's a myriad of different possibilities. And then as we go deeper into the story, I'm looking at what the original, what the primary kind of obstacle is, or challenge or event that takes place, that really then plunges them in to what they're going to do to resolve the issue and what their key problems are with the issue. Do they need to travel somewhere? Do they need to obtain some kind of special object or potion of some kind? Do they need to converse with anybody else along their journey? Do they meet anybody who might challenge them, who might aid them in some way, who might give them advice, who might give them a clue as to what to do next? So all of these things, I'm constantly using the tarot to get me thinking about what I want the story to look like in terms of this development. And then this card is about coming out of it. It's about finding the solution to the obstacle. It's about recognizing the core strength, and then the card at the end is some kind of ultimate resolution. And of course it's always going to be left slightly open-ended, because human life is left slightly open-ended for the time that we are living it, but there's always going to be some sense of a lesson. There's going to be some sense that we have procured something from this story which is going to enable the querent to actually look upon that as metaphor for what they can do about the challenges in their own lives at this point. And I must say, I feel storytelling readings, or storybook readings as I call them and have developed them, always go very well, and I'm always really pleased with what comes forward for the client, and I always feel like it's a very nurturing thing. So, you know, if you're looking for a new way to read for yourself, or if you're looking for a study aid, then I would really recommend some of the ideas that I've put forth for you in this video about Bardic technique, because it really can go anywhere that you want it to go. And I could talk about it all day. In fact, I can adequately explain how to write a novel using Bardic technique, but I know that none of you want to be here all day, so I'm going to leave it at that. I hope this was helpful. Much love, blessed be.